Hey, in this short art tutorial, we're going to talk about my favorite way to add textures to my artwork, which is text to paste. And we're also going to cover some of the most common questions I get asked about using text to paste. I'll write down each of the questions in the description below and have timestamps for them as well. So if you're just looking for an answer for a single question, you can jump right to it without having to watch the entire video. So what is text to paste? Text to paste is a ready-made paste intended for creating three-dimensional structures on various arts and crafts. There are also regional and brand-related differences in the names. So for example, whereas in Europe text to paste and structure paste are common terms, then in North America you see terms such as modeling paste and molding paste used. Now where do you get text to paste? Text to pastes and molding paste are commonly sold in arts and craft stores as well as in some larger general stores. And naturally, as with everything, you can also get it online. Now I have my own brand of text to paste that I sell on my website within the European Union and the United Kingdom. But if you're from some other region or otherwise would want to use some other brand, there are a bunch of options available, and good global brands include, for example, Golden, Liquitex, Amsterdam, Winsor & Newton, Dale & Rowney, and so forth. Then another option is always to get those store brand products that are regional. And if you're really budget conscious, you could try making your own text to paste, although those tend to be a lot less durable and crack a lot easier. And I have done a video on how to make your own text to paste earlier. I link it also in the description. Next question is, are there different types of text to paste? And the answer is yes. Text to paste come, for example, in different colors and consistencies. So you have smooth text to paste, you have coarse text to paste. Then you also have light modeling pastes, which are lighter, as the name suggests, and flexible modeling paste that you can create on top of, for example, watercolor paper and bend without them cracking. And then some text to paste dry so hard that they're almost indestructible, and you could even hit them with a hammer and they won't crack. Now, how to use text to paste? Regardless of the brand, every single text to paste I've used, you always start the same way. So you give the jar a proper mix and ensure that the ingredients are properly mixed within the paste. Once you've mixed your text to paste, you'll then apply it on a base and start creating. The time it stays workable on your base depends a bit on the environment. So if it's, for example, very hot, it dries up quicker. But for example, with my paste, I've usually worked with it for around 30 to 45 minutes before it has started to dry. And then to create patterns on the text to paste, you can use various tools such as texture combs or plaster combs from a hardware store, palette knives, your hands, and so forth. Basically, text to paste and textured art is so versatile that you can use whatever tools you want, and your imagination is the only limit. And once you're finished with your textures, it's a good idea to clean your tools, because as the text to paste dries, it gets a lot more difficult to clean. This brings us to our next question, which is, how long does it take for the text to paste to dry? This also depends a lot on the environment. So if it's really hot, it dries up quicker, but overall it does not dry as quickly as acrylic paints. So I usually wait around 24 hours just to be safe before I start working on my textures. And what can you use text to paste on? Now, a very common approach is to create textured art on top of a primed canvas. But good quality texture paste can be applied on top of almost any surface. And I've created, for example, on surfaces such as plywood, MDF, and watercolor paper. If you want to create textures on top of a raw canvas, it's a good idea to prime it first. And if you want to keep the surface of the raw canvas visible, just use clear gesso first. This brings us to the next question, which is, does text to paste crack and crumble off the base? Good quality text to paste very rarely cracks, and I found that there are two common reasons for text to paste to crack, and one is that you're using a poor quality text to paste, which most always means that you're using a do-it-yourself paste you made yourself from materials such as joint compound. And the second common reason is that you're spreading the text to paste too thick in a single layer, and the suitable thickness depends a bit on the brand you're using. But for example, with my text to paste, you can spread it approximately 1 to 2 centimeters in one layer without it cracking. So if you're experiencing a lot of cracks with your textured art, those are the two reasons to look out for. So either you're using poor quality paste or you're spreading it too thick in one layer. And even if the text to paste cracked, it's not the end of the world. You can easily cover it up with fresh paste once the first layer dries, but that's something we can cover in a later video. How do you color text to paste? There are two ways you can color your text to paste. One, you color the paste directly before you apply it on your artwork. And two, you wait for it to dry and then you paint on top of it. Usually by painting over the texture paste, once it's dry, you get a more vibrant color because you get the pure color on top of the paste and not a tinted down version. But sometimes it might be a bit difficult to paint over the textures once they're dry, and in those cases you can just as well color the texture paste before you apply it on the base. Mixing white paste with the paint results in a slightly tinted down version of the color. And naturally, the more paint you add, the more fluid the paste becomes. So if you add too much paint, it can become too runny to hold its consistency properly. And if you're concerned about your texture paste becoming too runny by mixing with acrylic paint, consider using heavy body acrylics instead of the regular soft body ones. And this brings us to the next question, which is what mediums can you use texture paste with? And my experience has been that all of the pastes I've used have been intended for acrylics, and I've only used them with acrylic paints. So I have no idea what would happen if you mix, for example, watercolor or oil paint with the texture paste. So that's something you have to try for yourself if you want to use texture paste with, for example, oil paint. And how do you change the consistency of the texture paste? If you, for example, have smooth texture paste and you rather have it coarse, you could mix in some sand to turn your smooth paste into coarse paste. Or if you'd want your dried texture layers to be really polished, you could also sand them with fine grit sandpaper. And if you decide to sand, make sure to use proper protective gear because you don't want to breathe in all of the texture paste dust. I hope you found this quick tutorial video on texture paste helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments and I'll do my best to help.